Hey, welcome back. So, which notes can you play over an E minor chord? Are there any notes you can't play over an E minor chord? Which are the best notes? Which are the worst notes to play over an E minor chord? That's the topic for today's video. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to strum an E minor chord into my looper. And then I'm going to play every note in music against or over that E minor chord. I'm going to explore which notes create the most tension and which notes create the least tension. So my method is going to be to identify the three notes that are that make an E minor chord, play those notes plus one other note, and then I'll play those three notes plus a different note and carry on until I've played all the notes in music and rated them as to which create the most tension and which create the least tension. I'm going to be doing this orally. I'm going to be doing this visually as well, and this is how I'm going to do it visually. So I've used the term tonal gravity, and I'm pausing because I need to make a disclaimer that tonal gravity is a thing and this is not what it is. I'll come back to that a bit later, but I stand by it. I think this is a great way to regard things. So here we've got the larger circle, and what I'm suggesting is that within this circle I'm going to position smaller circles. Each circle has a note name within it. At the center is the E, because I'm in the key of E, and E is going to create the least tension. I'm not really entirely sure where I'm going to place the other notes, so I'm going to see if I can grab this so I can move the circles around. I shall place them so that closer to the center is when they create less tension, further away is when they create more tension. And then I'll put the note name. So at the end of the day we'll have all the notes. If they're outside of the circle, I'm suggesting you can't play them over an E minor. A couple of things that I think's essential knowledge for you to be able to follow this video, I've written down the bottom here. So you need to know all the note names. Starting with an E, E, F, F sharp G, G sharp A sharp B, C, C sharp D, D sharp, and back to E. That's all 12 notes. There are only 12 notes in Western music. Yeah, it's different if we were, I think, in Indian music and Chinese music. I think they split the octave into more notes. But I'm referencing Western music. If you don't know all your notes, just learn them. The easiest way is, generally people know the Shakespeare quote, "to be or not to be." That's what I suggest to people, because even kids nowadays still know that quote, "to be or not to be." How do we spell the word be? It's spelled B-E. There's no B sharp. When we go up from B, a semitone up from B is C. Equally, there's no E sharp. When we go up from E, a semitone up, or one fret up from E, is F. So if you just remember that, every other note has got a sharp and or flat. So sharp signs are not actually the same as hash signs, but we're going to forgive that. I've used the hash symbol. Flat signs aren't that easy to find on my computer, but just so that you're aware, F sharp is a semitone up from F. G flat is a semitone down from G. So F sharp and G flat are the same note. Right? G sharp, A flat, A sharp, B flat equally. But I'm just talking in terms of sharps here, simply because of the symbols that are easier to find on my computer. Another thing that I think it's really important for you to, I think it's essential knowledge for you to understand this video, are note functions. So if we're in the key of E, E is our root note. Here are all the functions. F is our flat. Well, put it this way. Everything in Western music, we refer to the major scale. So when we're in terms of the key of E, we take the E major scale. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. And that is, we number those. Root, do. Root, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So the E major scale is E, F sharp, G sharp, A, B, C sharp, D sharp, E. And we number those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And therefore our F is a semitone down from our 2, so we call it a flat 2. Our A sharp is a semitone up from A, so we call it a sharp 4. So here are all the notes by function. We've got root, flat 2, 2, flat 3, 3, 4, sharp 4, 5, flat 6, 6, flat 7, 7, and then we're back to the root or the octave. A couple of things to note here. A sharp 4 is also sometimes referred to as a flat 5. So A sharp might be a sharp 4, it might be the flat 5. It's kind of semantic, they're the same thing. Similarly, C in relationship to E, I'm calling it a flat 6. In some circumstances, you'd call it a sharp 5 or an augmented fifth. The other thing, last but not least, E minor. What is E minor? E minor is a chord. We know it's a chord because you can't have a minor note. E minor chord, all minor chords and all major chords only contain 3 notes each. A minor chord is the root note plus the flattened third plus the fifth. That's every minor chord. In this example, E minor is an E plus flattened 3. The 3 is G sharp, so the flat 3 is G. So it's E plus G plus B. So let's go and pick up my guitar, start looking at this orally, and then what I shall do is I shall populate this and then I'll come back to it with you and discuss a little bit further. So E minor, I guess most people think of E minor like that. I've actually looped this E minor. I looped this because I actually prefer it as an E minor, and the reason I prefer it is also a good reason to use it in this example, I think. When we have our standard E minor, we have 3 E's. On our 6th string, our 4th string, and our top string. We then have 2 B's, the 5th of the chord, on our 5th string and our 2nd string, and then we have 1 flat 3 or G, which is on the 3rd string. Now compare that to the E minor that I've played and an E minor that I actually prefer. With this E minor, we still have 3 E's. They are now on the 6th string, the 5th string, and the top string, across 3 octaves. So they're the same 3 E's. However, we now have 1/5, the 5 note of B, and now we have 2 minor thirds. So I regard this as a bit more minor and that as a bit more fifth. Bit silly, but there you go. That's the E minor chord I've chosen. So here's what my E, my root, sounds like against my chord. what my B, my fifth, sounds like. So I'd suggest if I go from my fifth to my root, so even though the fifth is there in the chord, I'm suggesting it does create that tiny bit more tension than the root note. Here's my third, my flat 3. So now I'm going to try going from my flat 3 to my root, and then from my 5 to my root, and I'm trying to think, can I find any difference between them? Does the flat 3 create any more tension than the fifth when compared to the root? Let's give it a try. I think this video will be too long, and I'm not sure it'll be that interesting if I do this in detail all on camera. But I'm just going to show you the process that I'm going to go through, and I'll come back and discuss it later rather than doing every single note. What I'm going to do is going to take my 3 notes of E minor. That's my root, that's my fifth, that's my third, that's my root, that's my fifth, that's my flat 3, that's my root. So I'm going to take those 3 notes, play with those 3 notes, and then add one other note. So for now, I'm going to choose the sharp 4 because I really like sharp 4s. So threw in a major third there, do apologise. Sharp 4 is particularly spicy, so I'll just give you one more example, and I'll go for a flat 7. So I've got those 3 notes, my root, my flat 3 and my 5. I'm improvising with those, and I'm adding one other note, which is the flat 7. And here are the results of what I've discovered. To my ear, and I must stress that it is to my ear, the least tension, aside from the root, is the fifth. And next, almost as little tension, the third. The order in the end I went with after that is the second. Or when I say the third, I meant the flat three. Should I just stress it is flat. So fifth, flat three, then the second. I was slightly surprised that next I found the six. I thought it might be the flat six or the flat seven, certainly. And the flat seven, I kept playing these two, the flat seven and the six, against the root, and there wasn't a lot in it. But I do think that the flat six, and interestingly enough, I have a number of friends, lots of friends over the years who have played guitar, and I've noticed how many guitarists home in on the Dorian mode. I don't know quite why, but I learnt the minor scale first rather than the Dorian mode, and I think Dorian mode fits more situations, maybe. I'm a bit vague on that. And the six is what defines Dorian mode. The minor scale has a flat six. So yeah, I was interested by that. Let's stop the chat and just tell you the results. This is the order that I found, the least tension to the most tension. Root, fifth, flattened third, second, sixth, flat seven, flat six, four, flat two, seven, sharp four, major third. Just some food for thought for those who would say, well, you absolutely can't play a major third over an E minor chord, you know, because that would make it E major. Yeah, like, so there's E major. G sharp, shouldn't play that. Let me just remind you about this chord. So lots of people call this the Hendrix chord. We've got a root, we've got a flat seven, we've got a minor third, we've got a major third. So there's a minor third, major third. Just something to consider. Time for conclusions. There's a number of things that I haven't factored in at all, which are really important and significant. The obvious one is that we're rarely playing simply over an E minor chord or any one chord. And as soon as there's more chords in the mix, the more chords there are, the more the key is being locked down and defined by those chords. And I'm thoroughly aware of that, and I totally accept that. Why bother doing this sort of thing? Because, to my mind, this is really useful for training one's ear. Ear training is certainly one of the biggest aspects of my learning journey at the moment. I haven't factored in time, timing or groove, which are crucial aspects of music and which will affect the results. If I play particularly off the beat, that's going to create tension, even if I'm doing it with a root note. So timing matters. As I've mentioned earlier, it's all a matter of opinion. I'm aiming to provoke thought and interest and maybe even some inspiration. I'm not trying to suggest to you what is right or wrong. I'm also attempting to share some of my approach to improvising. Truth is that I learned a scales-based approach, and I was immersed in that scales-based approach for literally decades. I can't unexperience or unthink those decades. They are an essential part of me as a musician. However, I can think about what approach I would take if I went back in time. And I think there's a lot to be said for taking this approach, i.e. not a scales approach, i.e. simply learning all of the intervals across your guitar neck relative to a root note, and then exploring all of those notes over any given piece of music instead of just endlessly learning boxes like a parrot. I don't think there's anything quick or easy about any aspect of playing guitar. If I was taking a scales approach, then there's at least 9 scales I would need to practice over my E minor. And if you learn one scale and you learn every location of that scale across the guitar neck, that's maybe 5 boxes, 9 boxes times 5. That's dozens and dozens of boxes. The scales, if you want to take a scales-based approach, the scales that come to mind: E minor pentatonic, E Aeolian, or what people just call the minor scale, E Dorian, the blues scale, which is the minor pentatonic with a flat 5, E Phrygian, harmonic minor, melodic minor, Dorian sharp 4, Dorian flat 2. I think that's 9 different scales. I think the most important thing for me out of all this is that when I take a scales-based approach, there are no-go notes. If I'm playing any 7-note scale, there are 5 notes that are no-go. And I've personally found a lot more freedom on my instrument since I've stopped regarding there being any no-go notes. I encourage you to go forth and look into tonal gravity, as in the proper thing that is tonal gravity. As I mentioned earlier, I'll put a link in the description to Bobby Spellman's series on the Lydian chromatic concept of tonal organisation. In many regards, it's probably the biggest thing that inspired Miles Davis' Kinda Blue album. That's my understanding. I hope that this has intrigued, sparked a few thoughts, maybe inspired you to do some more exploring and training of your ear. I'm fascinated to get any thoughts in the comments. Please do like, subscribe, comment, share. Take care. I'm doing 100 videos in 100 days. Hope to see you tomorrow. Bye now.